My NWO shirt. Hey everybody, how's it going? I didn't record a video earlier today. Usually I like leaving you with a positive message or some mind-blowing truth bomb, but we're going to do an hour of it tonight. So I've got Kary Adams, who you guys have seen before. Our interview went extraordinarily well, where she explained how to basically um, get out of the whole tax system. And you know Bryan too. Bryan has been on my channel. I've been on his channel. He does the same type thing. So I figured I'd put these two minds together. Okay. And so my first question, just to get the ball rolling, and then obviously I don't have any notes. I don't write down any pre-screened questions. It's on the fly. It's just all natural. So Kary, can you start us off? Can you explain to us what the Sestri KV is?
Yes. So first off, that is basically it means like he who lives or between the living. So it's like a living trust. I kind of fell into that definition when I stumbled across something that said every taxpayer is a Sesticade trust. And so I
Now, there's two
started.
ways to say it, right? Because you just said it a different way.
Yeah, yeah. So depending on you right, like which dialect you could say. SSTKV or STK, depending on your dialect, if you're using French or
Right.
Latin base. So I think I don't know. I just say SSTK because that's just how it was in my head. I don't know how you say it, Bryan. Um, I basically, I mean, so to my understanding, that came from London, 1666, the Black Plague. Um, people weren't coming back to claim their belongings if they passed from it. And Bryan, I'm sure you can add to this because I wasn't really prepared to go into the whole story, but essentially when they weren't coming back, they created these trusts for them, so if the person came back after the plague, then they reclaimed their stuff, and if they didn't after so long a period, probably 7 years, then it automatically went to the king. So
Was
that's a
it
little
was it
bit.
the plague? Was it the plague or was it the Crusades?
I knew it as the plague, but again, I wasn't prepared to look it up. But my memory's been a little bit. That's been a while since I looked it up. So Bryan, you might be
Okay.
able to lend to that a little more too.
Right.
Yeah, sure. The Sesquier Act of 1666, that was set up in England, and people have heard the term, it was done for people to say lost at sea is a popular one that's used. But really what happened was they had the plague sweeping through there, sweeping through Europe, and they felt that the best way to eradicate it was to burn the city. Which, I mean, it could kind of make sense maybe to some people that could take care of the problem. And at the same time, though, because of course everybody's going to leave, everybody's going to flee, right? And so what they did is they set up properties in trust, and they were held in trust through the Sesquier V Act. I think attorneys refer to it as a SETI K, is what they call it for short. And then the people could come back if they came back within 7 years to reclaim their estates. Then prove that that they were still alive and they didn't perish, or decide to move to another country or something like that. Then they could be revested with their property, to put it in more of a legal term. And like I said, that was 1666. Excuse me, and that was in Europe. That was for England. And the way I kind of look at it is, well, let's go back to what Mandel House had said regarding getting everybody to register their property or their biological property. And the terminology he basically said was that they were going to do this in a form of pledging, or a type or a style of pledging. And so I think maybe the idea of the SETI Act is what was employed to do that. That was kind of the form that was chosen. That doesn't mean that that is the exact act being used, which obviously couldn't be, because, I mean, number one, that was going on almost 400 years ago. and it was for a different nation on a different continent. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's not the exact form that was used, but like he said, they would use a form or a type or style of pledging.
Yeah. Now, are you guys aware of how the plague started? I'll
I
share
could might
something
be
with
able to
you.
guess, but no.
This is how the plague started. There was the Pope at the time. He hated cats. Now, remember, the Jews supposedly came from Egypt, where cats were revered because they could see other dimensions. They could see into the afterlife as they thought. The Jews come around, write the Old Testament, and the Old Testament and the New Testament, not one mention of cat. There is zero mention of cat in the Bible, even though the Egyptians, supposedly they came from, revered it. This Pope hated cats. And what he did was he banned them. Okay, so it was open season to kill all these cats, and what that did was it drove up the rat population, and then the rest is history. The Catholic Church is directly involved in the reason that the plague actually happened. Now, Bryan, you just mentioned a thing to me. It's when you started talking about what you were just talking about. In my head, I was thinking of squatters' rights. Can you tie that in somehow?
Uh, I don't really know how you would really tie in squatters' rights. That would fall under something referred to as adverse possession,
Okay,
whereas if somebody has left their property, if they've abandoned their property, you can come in, and the different states have different laws on it. I know Florida is one of the more lax ones. It's 7 years here. Some states are 15 or more, maybe, but that's where you can come in and take care of the property. Just like any other trust situation, you've got to make it better than the way you found it. You need to improve it, and you can claim rights to it that way through like adverse possession. That would be a legal form of, say, it's squatters' rights. You know.
gotcha. Now, my question would be, um, can you ever really own something? Because you've got, I don't know if they did this in the past with Sesto KV hundreds of years ago, but I'm assuming that property taxes are not a new thing, right? So in the event that you pay off your mortgage, and mortgage in French means death clause, it's a 30-year death clause. Um, I'm wondering, I'm wondering if you know anything about that in the sense that they were, I guess, taxed on the land in the past, or is that just like a relatively new thing?
If you're asking me, it actually goes back quite a ways. Um, yeah, gosh, you can go back, biblically, supposedly during times of like Jacob and stuff like that, as far as rights to the land. Um, but when it comes to ownership, I think really people confuse what I stated regarding rights to the land with ownership, because
Mhm.
those are two very different things. You really have the right of use. You know what I mean? When somebody says they lost their house in a foreclosure, it doesn't mean they can't find it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Lost in a legal sense also means that a property has been transferred to somebody else. And so there really is no ownership. And even the Vatican knows that there is no such thing as ownership, because the one who owns something will be the one who created it, unless they sell it to another entity. But this earth was created by, of course, who else but the creator? And so the creator, who they nickname as God or give him that managerial title, it's really God's property, and you can't own it because he does. And that's why the Pope steps in and claims ownership to all the land and the people, because he's coming in as the vicar of Christ. It's the substitute of God here in the flesh.
Now,
And so they're even aware of that.
Carrie or Brian, this goes to both of you. Are any of these decrees that the Pope just basically looked over at all the land and said, "I own all these souls. I own this"? Are those papal bulls in the vault?
Good
Go ahead,
question.
Kary.
I haven't like read all of the papal bulls or anything, so I can't say definitively. Maybe Brian's come across something like that. Essentially, it's the office of and the claim. So that's how I see it, is that, and it goes all the way back, right, to the birth certificate and registering it. You kind of follow this path down through that. So you have to, I mean, the basic precipice here is to reverse engineer everything back, right, all the way to the creator. Which that was something that, you know, we kind of wanted to bring up tonight too, because it's so important, is understanding kind of that spiritual side. So Bryan Parker, I really didn't ever hear anybody else say this. I love this phrase he always uses: the legal imitates the spiritual. So if they're basically claiming ownership by, or like, that's maybe not even the right word, trusteeship or beneficiaryship, however they look at it, to that particular property from that office, then they're going to make that claim. So again, if the Pope is standing up saying, I own all souls, and then myself as a soul would say that I own a property, I really don't, right? Because of all the registration that we've done. We've registered it over to the king. And if that's the representative holding that office that is managing that, then I can see why he says, you know, I own all souls. So as far as him, you know, making that direct claim, I don't know. I haven't read anything specific to it that I can recall offhand, but you know, all 10 years of research stuff comes in and out, as you guys know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So
But
you
yeah,
guys have been talking behind. As soon as I asked you both to come on the channel, you were both like, "Fuck yeah!" But then you guys started talking behind the scenes that I wasn't a part of, and you guys discussed there was a spirituality. Let's get into that. I'm just gonna let you guys go back and forth. Tie the spirituality aspect into this if you can. I don't care who goes first. Let's start with Bryan, I guess.
Well, Kary and I have been in touch for a number of years, probably at least 5 or 6 years, since I started up the original group, Tactical Sovereignty. And, you know, as far as how these things imitate each other, I think the best way to look at it is like through the lens of what we're just describing as far as ownership of property. And it really coming down to the right of use, or people know the word usufruct, for instance. What they have done, how they have mirrored it, is that, you know, God, the creator, owns the dirt. He owns the soil. He owns the sand. And the adversary knows that he cannot become greater than the creator, but he says he will mirror him. He will be like him, you know. And so now, instead of the adversary saying, no, now I
When
own
you
the
say the
soil,
adversary, that's actually just another word for Satan.
correct. I own the soil, or I own the dirt. Instead, now the adversary is saying, um, I own control of the land. I decide, you know, who gets to make use of it, who gets to inhabit it, who gets to live there, or, you know, whether you get kicked off that acreage and somebody else has moved on to it. Yeah, but, and I should be able to quote basically chapter and verse, but this is in the canon laws where these claims are made by the papacy. And, you know, people can claim anything they want. It doesn't make it so. If you get in and read the canons, which, by the way, the Attorneys Association also have their rules laid out, and they're listed in canons as well. All right. But to look at what's been done is, since there can't be a claim on the physical man or woman, just like there can't be a claim on the actual dirt, then what they do is they throw on like an artificial overlay. And that's where your juridic person or your legal person comes in. And this isn't just theory. This is even referred to in the laws. I've seen it in laws for different states and in the United States Code when it's referring to the natural person versus the juridic person.
Okay.
So,
Can Kary, can you define that a little further? Because you have, first of all, you use the word person. Okay, and person Words mean things. I tell people all the time. It's why it's called spelling. Okay, because it literally casts spells. Okay, and the words that you use have a genesis to its origin, where the soul and the intention still applies to. Jordan Maxwell talks about church, going back to Kirk, going back to Ceres, going back to Circes. He talks about all of that. But when you're talking about, oh God, I guess when you're talking about this, well, I wanted to make a comment. Number one, um, lawyers, when they go to law school, as Jordan Maxwell says, they don't learn law, they learn procedure. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. They're all courts are administrative. So it's the processes in which they identify you as being that legal person,
Right.
which is your name and social, we can call it. And to back up a little bit, I think when you're in this kind of study for a long time, you do realize the words, and you start trying to correct yourself and say, okay, you're not supposed to say I understand because you're standing under, right?
Right.
We try to do that, but I think it's kind of common speak as when we're talking is like, okay, your natural person or your legal person, which one are we talking about here? So,
Just real quick before you go on, can you define person and citizen for everyone? What their true meanings are, Kary?
yeah, well, as you know, person, we talked about this on the last show, for
Right.
anybody that didn't catch up on that, but there is a connotation for monster there as one of the definitions.
Right.
I always hear phonetics first. Purse on, right? Your purse, your money. I guess that's kind of how I always related it. The money is in the purse. The horses win the purse. Everything was the purse on. So the monetized side of it is going to be your legal persona or that name and social security number, just for simplicity's sake. And
Mhm.
then we refer to it, I guess, as the natural person, which would be the living being. So we can
Right.
distinguish it by saying legal being. I think just in our circle in general, we say, oh, your natural person or your legal person. But when we say natural person, we kind of are talking about more the living being, because there is a
Right.
distinguished thing. And then like that, once you know that you are the created one, right? You have that omnipresence inside you. Now you start understanding why the people have all the true power. It's just which side of the fence are you speaking that truth
Right.
from? Are you speaking it from the legal person side, where you don't know that you shouldn't really say that you're a citizen, because situs is situs in Latin, which is, basically where property sits. So that where you're sitting. So they've venued you, right? Revenue, revenued you onto that public side, that legal person, in order to gain revenue, right? That's how they monetize that
So is
specific
it fair to say we keep talking about living person, and anybody who's actually looked into this kind of stuff before has seen people in court constantly referring to themselves as the living man or the living person? Bryan, can you explain, one, if that does anything, but two, does that work? And number three, I'd like you to explain, basically, if you can, how the court system is ecclesiastical and it's basically just mirroring the church. Oh no.
Oh, do we lose
Yeah.
Bryan?
Damn it. You want to take a stab at that, Kary?
Okay, wait. So the first part of that was
The first
go
part of
back.
that is they say you're a living person, right?
Mhm.
Or you are a living person. So
Oh,
in
in
church,
court.
in court, okay?
Yes.
First and foremost, if you're a living person, okay, does that mean when you walk into court or enter into contracts, they view you as being dead?
No, not necessarily. When we say dead, it's like a non-living entity, because it's a piece of paper that really has no movement or energy without my energy behind it. I can create a business all day long on a napkin, but until I actually start forming, articles of incorporation, going to, pick out a name, getting staff together if I need, and breathing that life energy into it. Now that little napkin piece of paper kind of has some energy behind it.
Right.
So to answer your question on the court, when you walk in and you claim just that you are living, if you walk in and they'll say, identify yourself. And I would say Kary Adams, social security number, or they'll ask you your address or whatever they ask you to verify that. They're trying to immediately pin jurisdiction on you because court is all in presumptions, right? It's all administrative. So unless
does this
you
go back to the whole jurisdiction of 10 miles?
Yes. But that's a whole kind of other side of it.
Okay, I don't want to confuse you. I want to keep you on this train of thought.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I've heard this argument a lot where people go into court and, I'm the living man. And I understand why they're doing that. And that's accurate, obviously.
And they present a live birth certificate.
Right. But there's a difference when you walk into court because they're looking for that legal person, the Social Security dependent to, because that's where they get the funding from, is that Sesta trust.
So is the best thing to do not to give your full name? Because then you're claiming.
I explain it like this. It's kind of like if I think we might have talked about this on the last show. Forgive me if I'm being repetitive because
there's a lot of new people here too. So forgive me if I'm being repetitive.
No, that's and exactly. And if you hear it again, the more I heard things, the more that I understood them, right? Like over and over repetition. So essentially, if I want to open a Golden Arches franchise, I want to get in trouble for saying anything I shouldn't. If I want to open a franchise with them and I decide that, I want rainbows and hearts on my arches because I'm of a specific affiliation, then they're going to look at me like, what are you talking about? We own this. We own the rights to it. We created that. That's all our creation. Therefore, we have the rights to it. So when you walk into that courtroom, if you're claiming that you're that person, they own the rights to it. So it's the same hierarchy as if I were trying to make changes to as a franchisee, right? So that's why it doesn't always work walking in there because you have to correct the presumption. And Bryan's done an amazing job, which is I'm actually kind of one of his students, if you will, because he was the first person that I found that really laid it out as to how we correct those things. So once you correct them, then there's really no need to go to court because we talked about this last week, Matthew 5:25, it says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something to the effect of settle your affairs with the magistrate before you go to court, lest he throw you over to the officer who gives you over to the bailiff and throws you in jail. So those kind of things kept popping out at me as how to handle, what I was doing. And then I, come across some of Bryan's work and his, claims to life and things that he was doing and recording. And I'm like, whoa, this is letting them know and putting on their record what we should be doing and establishing the difference between that natural being, that God created being, or the one that they created in their organization under their little franchise, if that makes sense. I'm using franchise word just to kind of explain kind of how they've done it. So
Sorry,
that's why it doesn't really work to just go into court. And, maybe for some people it has. I heard a beautiful story of a woman and she was terrified. She just started learning this stuff. And she went into court and she just said, I don't want to be held as surety. Don't want to be held, for surety for that security. And so when she signed her paperwork, she signed it in only pen she had, which was red ink. So as you go through this journey too, you'll understand that the ink colors actually have a significance as well.
They do in business too, right?
What was that?
They do in business too.
Yes. Yeah. So you've got your blue ink and your black ink. And if you notice on a lot of court stuff, at least I do, a lot of the judges and signatures and things will be in blue.
Well, they have to be. Do you know why?
I don't know actually why. Bryan probably doesn't. I'm sure I've read this before, but again.
All right, I'm going to explain it to you because it's the same thing in business.
Okay.
Because it's an original copy. When you photocopy blue, it goes black. So when you sign something in blue, it's an original copy, and that's what they need.
Yeah. So there you go. Because we're always asking for, wet ink signature, right? The original copy or the original of those, not the copies.
Right.
So that's kind of why it doesn't really work to just start claiming you're a man. Like clearly we're all beings. It's just which persona are you operating under when you walk in that room? And that's where it becomes the legal imitates the spiritual, because you have to kind of tear that veil. And I started seeing it with, the courtroom was the like synagogue of Satan or the synagogue of the adversary.
Right, with the black robe, with the judge, the priest of Saturn, right?
Exactly. So that legal person is what they created, which isn't a living entity, right? So that's where they get the dead entity. It's not really living, right? It's just a piece of paper somewhere filed with your name.
It's your social security card in all caps.
It is, yes. So that, capital makes you human capital, right? So that's why I don't really agree with, going into, and again, remember folks, this is all trial and error. I mean, it's kind of like we're reading this stuff and we're reading these books and we're trying to comprehend what they've done. Kind of like with my story where I was like, well, they must have made me a federal employee somehow. Right. How, how did they do that? So again, everything is just reverse engineering and asking the why. And once you start understanding what the why is, like a whole new world opens to you. And you're like, okay, now I understand the why, so I can speak to what it is. And again, I try to keep things uber simple. Bryan is, he's a brainiac. He's probably one of the smartest humans on the planet, in my opinion, because not a lot of people figure this out. Not a lot of people understand that or comprehend. I try to correct myself. Not a lot of people know that you can even, record a claim of life. Like, what is that? I've never heard of it, until I found Bryan's group. So in a sense, I was a student of his, and I found him right at the right time, divinely inspired, in my opinion, because he was showing samples of what he was doing. And I hope he gets back in here because he's got a fascinating story of his ID and how, but I'll let him tell that because it's really fascinating. So he was one of the kind of, I call him the OGs, right? He was very brave because he went on Facebook and opened this group. And I'm like, whoa, like you got to have some serious, cojones.
Let me put it to you this way, okay? If you're you're married, right? Or no, you're not.
Well, I was, but yeah, it's kind of going the other way. But we'll leave that for.
I'm sorry. Okay, but hypothetically, well, I'm married. Okay, let's say you cheat on your wife or your husband, right? When you come back, would you not be off? Would you not tiptoe around the problem, even if a ton of people know? Wouldn't you be very careful?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So if this whole thing with and the reason I say that is for this, to make a comparison. If you're talking about this whole system just being a house of very wordy cards, right? Why would they hire 87,000 IRS agents? Why would they just throw more at it? Just to get a little guy, the $600 on PayPal, right? That you have to claim now. Why would they start doing all that?
I'll tell you what's happening right now. And I don't want to go too far into this because I'm kind of newer in it myself, but what is happening now?
We'll let Bryan pick up where you leave off.
Okay. Yeah. And if he wants to go back and add anything to the, name in court too, I'm sure he can add to that as well, even though I know he didn't hear the part I said, but, oh gosh, sorry. I hate when I jump off topic because then I throw myself off my train of thought.
87,000 agents.
Yes. So right now there is a big movement where multiple people took the IRC, which is IRS codes, and also the Treasury manual. And I guess total, I think I looked at it was like 11,000 pages. And one guy apparently read the whole thing And then there were multiple people who started study groups on it and broke it up into sections, bringing all the information together. What they found was, and this is just a movement that's happening right now. And so you understand why, if your tax returns are, if you do pay taxes, why your returns are late and all this. There are this is just my estimate. There's 9,000 people in the two groups that I know are doing it. And what they're doing is requesting audits from every single account that they've ever had. So when I pulled my report, it was like 190 pages. So
are you talking about your credit report?
Yeah. So LexisNexis is your full credit report. That's the movement that's happening now. And I don't recommend anyone just jump into that, because that has been probably, 2 years of study for me on the why, right? I always have to know the why so I don't get myself into hot water. But that's what's happening right now. I know multiple people who are doing it and having mad success with it. Because what would
that do? What happens when because
they're balancing the books. So you
made the claim last time that when you ask the IRS to audit, suddenly they're working for you and they're being used the way it should be used.
That's how they're supposed to be used. Yeah. So a lot of people have now figured this out, and they're following what it says in the Treasury manual in order to request these audits. And you're not even really requesting them. You're more telling them, because it's, under your legal persona name.
Now, what would be the purpose of auditing everything?
So let's say your mortgage was sold 5 times and they created identities, and people are finding now when they request certain documents that their names have been signed on things. So that's identity theft. So they're now basically going in, and it's not an easy process by any means. It's a very thick process. Okay. I just want to make inherently clear. And it takes some study and learning, but they are going in and requesting audits on every account to make sure that they haven't been identity theft, victims, and also that the accounting is now balanced. So we know we live on the national debt side, right? We're all aware of that by the loans we sign. What they're doing is they're balancing the books from the public side and the private side where they have credit. So that's what's happening now. And that's the reason, I believe, because I went on the IRS website and I was looking at it, and it had a notice on there that they were 6 million documents behind. Now, I know from some of the study groups that I'm in that they are submitting boxes of paperwork to be audited. So this is happening. Like, it's no joke. And I think that it's gonna be a big can of worms here pretty soon. And I'm told by someone who's actually working with the Treasury that they know, basically, let me just be clear. They know the book has been opened. And now what seems to be happening is they are creating people that can help process what's going on here, because they're signing with their beneficiary signature on cover letters and things like that. So they're distinguishing that they know they're the beneficiary of this trust, and they want to balance those books, which what that's doing is erasing the national debt.
Which you said, and it blew my mind last time. So, Bryan, this question goes to you. Forgive my ignorance on this subject, but the way I see it is basically this. You have a credit card for $1,000, okay? And you can't really pay it. So you take out a credit card for $2,000 and it pays the $1,000. And as you go up in these financial interests, when you hit the Federal Reserve, that's it. Ain't no more money besides what the Federal Reserve prints. Now, if I take out $1 from the Federal Reserve, they charge with interest. So I end up having to pay $1.08. So the only way to physically pay the interest is to take out more money. So it's a never-ending cycle that benefits the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, Morgans, all of them, until the house collapses. But do you agree with Kary? When they balance this out, I want to understand how this could fix the national debt.
Well, number one, there's not going to be any fixing the national debt. I think it was Hamilton was the only president underneath him that the foreign debt was all paid off, right?
I think
And that's something very specific to look
handled
at.
national debt. Yeah.
Or Jackson, yeah, Jackson, correct. And when you look into that, it'll say that all of the foreign debt was dissolved, and they're specifying foreign for a reason. Excuse me, because the majority of the debt is really coming from the Treasury, which is essentially a third party. You know what I mean? We all know that the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor is it a reserve. There are none.
Right.
But so it's impossible, technically impossible, to pay off the national debt 100%, both foreign and domestic, because the domestic debt coming from the Federal Reserve, all of the money that gets pumped into the system comes with a price tag on it. It's like 6 cents per note or something like that, right? So if you owed somebody $1,000, well, you go and get that from the Treasury, all right, and pay them $1,000. But now that $1,000, now you're in debt for $1,060 that's been tagged onto it. See what I mean? So you keep going up and up and up, and technically it's impossible to pay it off when you are borrowing the money, or that money is being lent to you with interest. It's impossible to pay it off. So, and I recommend people, right, that's the way it's designed. That's the way a fractional lending system works. And it's also set up to expand and contract. I hear a lot of people, I've heard people ask people about, when do you think the housing market is going to level back out? And it frustrates me. I hear some of these people who should be in the know say, well, I don't know. I think it's just going to keep going and going and going. Well, if you go and look at the markets, you can look at recessions. They occur just about every 10 years, like clockwork. All right.
They do.
And I think that there is something astrotheology wise that is tied into that as well. Okay?
Well, I explained that. The major market. So I explained that
every 10 years.
The major market crashes, the major ones, always happen in Libra. Always. They always happen in Libra. And on top of that, okay, every time there's been a major crash, a Republican's been in office. Okay, they don't crash it when a Democrat's in office.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I can show you the proof. I did a video on it. Bryan, can you explain quantitative? I'm sorry?
Quantitative easing? Quantitative easing, I think the best definition of that is just kicking a can down the road. But I want to refer to something as well with the IRS and the situation that's going on there as well. Okay.
Yes, please.
Because and I never will really point at one single thing that's causing something. I think there's many things at play, and there's something just as big at play within the IRS system that most people really don't know, because we're on the outside, watching what's happening, and we don't really know what's going on the inside. You know what I mean? So a lot of it is speculation. But if you get into the inside and talk to people on the inside, and I'm fortunate down here in Southwest Florida, and so I get to talk to a lot of people who are retired bureaucrats. I've talked to a lot of retired IRS people, and they don't have really kind words to say about the IRS, even themselves, even though they're drawing a pension or whatever from them. But what's going on as well at the same time, simultaneously within the IRS, there is a lot of people timing out right now, okay? Which means their tenure is over, they're retiring, and they have to replace these people. And at the same time, there's also a lot of
Are
people
you talking about?
leaving.
Are you talking about like the last wave of the boomers?
Right, right. And at the same time, there's people that may not even be timed out or might not even be retiring yet, but they're quitting and leaving and going on to greener pastures. So these people have to be replaced, and they've had a tough time the past few years, 5, 6 years. They've had a tough time replacing some of these people because the IRS hasn't necessarily gotten a really good rap. Everybody gets that little pit in their stomach whenever they pick up a piece of mail that comes from the IRS. You know what I mean? And they typically just set it aside. They don't even want to open it. And so at the same time, people aren't necessarily going to want to go there to work either.
Right.
So they're getting hit from several different directions right now.
Right. But
And
do you
then
think
on top of it,
do
with
you
the
think
whole question of what the dollar's doing.
Kary, you were talking about 9,000 people, Bryan. You're talking about. I struggle to understand the 87,000.
Yeah, well, it's a big operation. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's other, I mean, obviously there's so many other processes, right, going on besides, auditing, right? And just general day to day. There was COVID, which I actually spoke to someone there and she said that they weren't even back in office yet. There was only 12 people working in her office, which previously there was like double that. So yeah, Bryan's right. There's a lot of factors. I just know that's happening right now. And what was taking people 2 weeks to 2 months, or not even a month to do, is now taking 3 to 6.
Right.
So I see that it's, slowing down. That's why I went on
Because
to
a lot of people got a taste from working from home and they like it. A lot of women came home and they were able to raise the kids and they're like, "Fuck this! I'm not going back to work." And good,
Well,
I have a
Micah,
question. Yeah, sorry.
Micah, that's another aspect right there. That's another aspect right there of what's going on, is because it's been a double-edged sword, and what they were doing, the whole work from home idea and all that kind of stuff, has kind of come back to kick them in the butt because some of their own employees are saying, "Oh yeah, let's do that." You know what I mean?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, it has come
Absolutely.
item, absolutely right.
So
'Cause nobody wanted.
one of the main talking points that they're throwing out there right now is that the Fed raises the rate, like for the mortgages, or just raises the rate in general, and that's supposed to curb inflation. Do you agree with that? Is that gaslighting for something else? What are your thoughts on it, guys?
Well, I mean, overall, I'm sure that is part of it. It's all part of it to me. It's a complex, rising tides raise all ships kind of thing. The market, like all that flow, it all works together to me. It's the timing and the, you know, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there where I was going with that, but essentially it's all pre-programmed, right? We know this. We're seeing the patterns now, just like you said, every decade, certain things happen. And
Right.
so people are now onto it, is the difference that's happening now, and starting to ask questions. And that's where, like I said, I kind of get excited about it, just because we've just been in this mode for so long of this is what you do and this is how it works. And now we're going, wait, hold on, what just happened? Like, this is not for me, and again, working from home, and man, I don't want to be in this corporate world anymore. And we were seeing that anyway with the younger generations coming to work. I mean, I got to the point where I was nervous to actually hire anybody under 30 because I knew they weren't going to be there that long. And I'm like, okay, how much money can I afford to spend onboarding people? So yeah, everything's changing.
I find people become wiser and more tolerable when they have a Saturn return. So after 30, I find
Yeah.
people tend to be more in tune with things. So let me ask you about the question. Bryan, you're back. It's good to see you. Um, so my question is, um, the interest on the national debt is something like $800 billion. Okay, that is paid, but
Yeah,
they're
sorry,
not actually paid. Sorry.
you're kind of funny.
All right, good. The national debt, the interest at 30 billion is something like 800 billion. 30 trillion is something like 800 billion. They make they make payments on this. They pay the interest on it. Are they paying down the principal? And how much debt do you think, until the people that run the newspapers, run the countries, do this, do that, say enough is enough? When do we become insoluble?
We don't become insoluble, and the reason why is because the average Joe really doesn't know how the whole financial system works. I recommend people to go get a Chicago book, the manual on banking. Explain. They had that out of print for a long time. It's only been back in print the past several years. But what people don't realize, we all deal with the FRNs or the USD, United States dollar or Federal Reserve note. That's what we're all dealing with. And we kind of think that that's how the system operates when it really doesn't. The poor people, the serfs, use the Federal Reserve notes. The rich people operate in credit. That's what their money is.
That's
their
what you said, Kary, last time when you had that meeting with the drunk guy.
Yeah. And he was like, we don't use money. Like, I'm sorry, what? And that was like, again, these things kind of divinely come to you, right? And it makes you think. And so everything was kind of a little stepping stone. I'm like, wait, what is he talking about? They don't use money. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
People need to realize as well, when you're listening to whether it's a representative on TV or any of these people talking from the Treasury, and they kind of act like they're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. You know what? You cannot freaking believe them. All right. These people know exactly what every little tiny thing does. Yeah. Right now, you're talking about, raising the interest rate, a point or a quarter.
Are you talking about when Janet Yellen comes out there and just blatantly lies to everyone?
Yeah. Everything they say really is a lie. They know. There's a site you can go to. It's called FAR. I believe it's called the Foreign Acquisition Registration. It's also listed as FARM as well, Foreign Acquisition Registration Matrix. Okay. And within this system, they know what's going to happen with everything. I was looking at a chart a few weeks ago where they were looking just at deaths. Okay. And they were looking at deaths as far as suicides and murders. And they found that they could adjust that and tell what was happening with those just according to unemployment. When unemployment went up 5 or 6 points, you started seeing a lot more suicides. When unemployment was going up 6 to 7% more, you started seeing a lot more murders taking place and occurring. So there's a lot more crime going on. They know every little thing. If they tweak it a quarter point, half a point, they know how it's going to affect every sector of society. So
Wow.
no, it's not like they're clueless. They know exactly what every little tiny thing they do is going to affect and what it's going to cause.
So, Kary, I have a question for you. You know how the world trades in the petrodollar, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nixon is the one that put that in place, right? I think Nixon put it in place that we're to trade oil in the dollar. The world would do it. And you'll find countries like Libya, Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, when they wanted to start trading in gold, that's when America had to bring some freedom, right? That's basically what happened. If more countries start trading in gold instead of the dollar, could that bring us down financially? I'm asking speculative questions. You're not an expert.
It's hard to say. I think all of it is kind of it's just a perception, right? I mean, if we what was the first forms of money? Shells and salt, things like that. It's our perception of what that is. So, I understand where they're going with going to a gold standard again. I don't know if that's really going to fix the problem because, on the other side, we kind of know a little bit more. I guess it's just, and that's like the same concept with crypto, right? Like people thought, well, if we can create our own, then we're not so reliant on them anymore, right?
Well,
And their
whereas gold is actually something tangible and valued
and
throughout history, whereas
yeah,
crypto is just numbers, ones and zeros.
digits, same, yeah, same thing, same thing. But I kind of get all sides because obviously we can't carry around gold bars. Crypto gets super sketch, right? Although the only thing I actually did like about it was I actually created a crypto. I just wanted to see how easy it was or how hard it was. I created one in 30 minutes and we actually got together a team of people and we were utilizing people's hard drives in order to do medical things, look for biomarkers, and we were rewarding them and it's just the same thing like you get little stars on Reddit or whatever those things are, right? It's the same kind of system. They're all the same, just different names. I don't know if the gold standard's going to fix everything. In my opinion, no. But I mean, I guess there's solutions. That's a really complex question, just because
That's
of
fine.
all the
Bryan,
different sides we know about, I guess. So
Bryan, do you have anything to add to that? Any thoughts you got?
Yeah, I think the best thing that people could do, I mean, we looking at a lot of things at the macro level. Yeah, I think everything really needs to start at home, needs to start in the community. It seems like whenever anybody's ever messed with the money, that is when they get in trouble. You brought up like Libya, for instance, and you even look within, the so-called truth movement, people like Winston Shroud or whatever. Whenever anybody starts playing with the coin of the realm, that's when the hammer comes down. You know,
Right.
and when we're going out to other countries, supposedly spreading democracy, I think instead of that word democracy, we need to replace it with the fractional lending system.
The first thing
Because
they did when they
it is,
toppled
yeah. Yeah, I
the
was going to
first
say that we only have a democracy because of this system. Otherwise, it would all be the republic.
well, the first thing they did in Libya when they toppled Gaddafi, aside from shoving a stick up his ass, was to build a central bank. That was the very first thing that they did. The very first thing. And if you guys ever want to get mind blown, there's videos on YouTube of Gaddafi in his car with thousands and thousands of people just cheering him on. Look at what Libya offered people before they got freedom. I say this jokingly because we bring freedom. That was the whole George Bush thing. That's what we do. We go over there and we fix things. We install dictators. We put central banks. That's what we basically do.
Yeah.
yeah, we fix things. We give them a fixed system.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Libya, you got married. You and your wife received $50,000. You
Right.
paid little to nothing for health care. You paid very little for electricity. You're
Gasoline was, I
spending of
think,
life.
gasoline was 8 or 14 cents a gallon. If you
Yeah,
wanted to start a farm, forget it. They gave you $20,000 land and the seeds. Libya
if
was,
you wanted,
yeah.
if you wanted to go to college, they would pay for your college. You got,
And
free
not
education,
only
and
that, but if you wanted to get a degree in something that they didn't offer, they would pay for you to go abroad.
they would pay for you to go abroad, and also give you a monthly stipend to live on. Correct.
Yes. Come on now.
That's the thing, when people, it's kind of this whole thing when we're starting to see that everything that we thought was, it's opposite, right, of what we thought it was. And here we think, God and country, and this is who I am. And then we find out that's not who we are at all.
No.
We're using these numbers and names, and that's not who we really are. And same with these countries. And I know a lot of these too, Bryan probably can speak to this more than I can. They match up with Hague versus non-Hague. I noticed like the same, kind of countries that were non-Hague, which are,
Can you define what Hague is for the
United States.
listeners?
What was that? Sorry.
Can you define what the Hague is for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically like how they contract with other countries is in a general sense. The United States. I'm sorry.
Right. It relies heavily on the Hague Treaty, and as far as countries dealing with other countries, I was talking to an attorney a couple years ago, and I brought up the situation where I think it was like Toyota. where people were wanting to sue and things like that because rear end explosions or some crazy thing that was going on with their cars. And because it's in another country, they actually had to go through the courts at The Hague in order to bring any action. And it just really made things a big cluster, you know what.
Yeah, right. Jeez. Um, so yeah, people look up on the internet. You might not want to use Google. Use. I tell people to download the Brave browser because DuckDuckGo openly is working with the government to censor things. Download the Brave browser. Go to the Brave browser and look up what Libya life was like before the invasion. How much they paid for everything. If you want to blow your mind, this will blow your
Believe it or
mind.
not, believe it or not, that is still on Google.
Is it really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it
thought that would
shocks
have
me,
been
but
scrubbed. I thought that would have been
no,
scrubbed.
I don't. I've gone and looked for it just to see if they took it off, and no, it's still up there. Yeah.
Oh wow,
And,
that's
and here's
ridiculous.
the thing, okay? Let's look at things realistically. If you want to have a strong country, if you want to have a prosperous country and a prosperous inhabitants or citizens or denizens, whatever you want to call them, then what you're going to do, it's about investing. Investing is what brings back your return for you. So you look at the US, it's so heavily vested in companies like, say, Coca Cola, Disney, you name it. I won't go into the CAFR accounts, which actually it's not CAFR anymore. It's now um, CARF instead of CAFR. But they go
Uh-huh.
and they invest all this money in these other companies that brings back great returns for US Inc. Well, if you really wanted to incentivize people to pay taxes and to become part of the 26 CFR voluntary taxing system, then what you would do is you would be giving people dividends because now your taxes isn't just something that you're paying because supposedly dirty old Uncle Sam says you owe money. No, you're paying it in because it's an investment program and they're going and helping to build stronger countries or stronger companies, stronger states, and a stronger populace, and it's bringing back a return. So now you might get a kickback. You might start getting a return for those taxes that you paid. Quit calling them taxes. Start calling them, investment incentives, and
Right.
actually give people a return. And you will build a stronger country if that was their intent. That is not their intent. Their intent
No.
is world domination. That's
Yes.
one of the things that when it came to like Trump, okay, people have to realize that even within this big global system, that the deep state, if you want to call it that, they're even in factions. There's factions of them, just like there's Republicans,
Right.
Democrats, Independents, Green
Yes.
Party, whatever. They have factions as well. So within the deep state, which Trump is,
Well, the
yeah,
mafia,
he's deep state.
the
But
mafia,
within
the mafia
right,
has two. The mafia has two sets of books. They have the clean books for their normal businesses, and then they have their other set of books that has all the other stuff. Guarantee you, it's the same thing.
well, that's where they learned how to come up with the CAFR accounts. That's where they learned it from. That's who taught them when they went and took out the mob in Chicago. But that situation with Trump and what happened there is that the faction that he belongs to wants to have, guess what, a stronger USA. And why does he want a stronger USA? Because he's got businesses here. He wants to make money. You know what I mean? And so he wanted to have a stronger homeland. Well, this other faction within the deep state, what they want to go after world domination. That's their goal. All right. Well, and I think Trump's attitude was fine. You want to take over the world, that's good, but you're going to have a strong foundation first. And he was after the strong foundation. And
Right.
I think right now, what you're looking at basically is no different than a drug addict that they're going through their cushions, trying to find every cent and penny they can. They're trying to sell anything they have. If they can sell some of their neighbors' crap, they're doing that too. And they're just trying to pull in every little red cent that they can right now. And this is uh, what does Scripture call it? It calls it the birth pangs, and that's
Yeah,
what
Brian, I saw
they're
something
saying.
on that recently where the Pope had called in like all kinds of bonds and things like that. And I was like, there it is.
Yeah, that was the end of Libra. I thought there was
Yeah.
going to be a crash, but there wasn't because there was a Democrat in the office. I talk about this. Yeah, everything had to be recalled to the Vatican's bank. Everything.
Yeah, they're calling in debts because they're even losing their populace. Their churches are emptying out. Look what happened, through this pandemic here the past couple years. It only takes changing somebody's habits 30 days before you've made a markable difference in how they behave. And so if you keep people from going to church for a month, guess what? You've just set a new lifestyle for them. And
Yep.
going to church isn't part of it.
Yep. Just like
Yep.
working out or anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, 30 days, right? It's set the new. So I did have another question. I wanted to tie this up back with. I wanted to let you guys go back and forth, and I'm actually going to run to the bathroom. But I wanted you guys to I wanted to finish this off with more about the spirituality that you guys were discussing. I'd like to try and leave this on somewhat of a positive note. So if you guys if you want to share what you guys were talking about before you guys came here, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Bryan. Sorry.
No, I say go ahead, Kary. Yeah, I would discuss this on a call that we did a week ago as well.
Yeah, Bryan has an awesome show. So, I'm sure Micah can link to all that good stuff too. He's had a wonderful group of resourceful things for us on Facebook at the Tactical Sovereignty groups that he runs. And just a lot of really cool information comes through, and it's like so overwhelming. Sometimes you can't keep up with it all, but each part of it kind of leads on your journey. But I resonate a lot with people who get the spiritual side. I just kind of a quick background on me. I went through a nice cancer scare and got really sick and fasted in order to cleanse and heal. I didn't want to go through chemo and radiation because I just watched my aunt lose both of her breasts, and it scared me. So I decided that before I went any other route, I was going to go natural and, kind of fasted. And while I was fasting, a lot of visions and things come into your mind, and you dream very lucid dreams. And I started writing them down and putting a dream journal together and kind of connecting the things that my spiritual background had shown me. And I'm like, whoa, that's actually a Bible verse. And I'm starting to connect the dots. And before you know it, I'm just deeply engrossed in the Bible now for a completely different reason than I was years ago, studying to be a pastor to help young girls. So I just kind of went through that scare, and it really awakened me to what was going on. But the Bible had this layer to it where it had commerce and merchantry. And so I started seeing all those things, and then I couldn't get enough. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really amazing. Like, I got so deep into it, and the etymology of the words, like you talk about, Micah, that I literally had to just put it down, and I just kind of cried, and I was like, okay, what is this book? Like, I've known it as this my whole life, right? And then this spiritual experiences start happening to me, and where you really, for lack of better words, you kind of really understand that you are part of the creator and how the omnipresence works, which was a beautiful thing. And I'll link that back to Micah's video on what is God, because he kind of covers the scriptures on that, which I found very fascinating because it had linked to what I had seen when I was going through cancer. So when you start to understand the Bible is the top layer that they have built this whole thing upon, right? And using the Roman Catholic Church, you then have to start kind of weeding through going, okay, well, which is the part that they're using for the law and which is the part that they're using for the spirituality. And you see that they're kind of layered nicely on top of each other. And once you understand that omnipresence within you is what actually gives you your power, because I mean, as far as I knew growing up in church, like, all men are created equal, right? Like, we all put our pants on, we all have skin, we all have these similar things. We all have different mindsets and journeys, and I feel like maybe that's the creator expressing himself or itself, or however people want to refer to it. When I had that experience, it seemed more like energy, which electrically speaking, we have the male and the female part, and we put them together and we create a spark. Even in birth, this happens. Scientists now see a spark. So it's the same when we plug something in. So for me, I was always looking for that kind of feminine aspect, which was interesting because when I started having the visions when I was fasting, I started seeing how the male and the female energies come in play, positive and negative energies. And that took on a whole other electrical level, which there's kind of a layer in there as well on that. And of course, anatomy, as you know, and I'm sure you've taught a lot on Micah, especially, coming from the Santo Spinaci world, because that's actually, I think, how I found him, is I started seeing the bones in the human brain are related. And I started searching. And lo and behold, there's Santos's work on some of that. So it all layered for me. And I just started really going, whoa, this is like, have a million questions went through my head. Am I reading this correctly? Like, then I started, going into different languages and etymologies to understand a little deeper. And I literally just set it down like, okay, what am I supposed to see here? Right? Ask and you shall receive. I need the knowledge, I need the wisdom to understand this, because quite frankly, I went through like a 6-month period of just being completely overwhelmed of what is it that I'm reading? It's not what I thought it was my whole life, right? Coming up through the church system. And so that was a big awakening for me. And it was also very isolating at the same time, because I couldn't really explain this to, my church going friends and people that I had studied in the Bible study stuff with. And as I'm finding it, and I would drop little nuggets like that, of course, they're like, where are you getting that? Or how do you see this? And so it was a very isolating and very kind of lonely journey, but I'm very grateful for it at the end of the day, because if I hadn't, gone through cancer, then I wouldn't have fasted. If I hadn't fasted, I wouldn't have had visions. If I had visions, I wouldn't have, seen things a different way and started searching. And so everything was just a really nice stepping stone for me, regardless of that experience. And I always say this, I never wish cancer on anybody, but I wish the mindset of it on everyone. It will change your life. You love deeper. You really just say, you know what? I had it all wrong. I've had, when you see that, you feel that love. I will never be able to put this in words, but when you feel that love and you experience something like that, it changes your whole life, the way you see people and treat people. And again, I kind of look at it as like, well, is the creator experiencing themselves on itself or himself on on this path to understand what that is? Because otherwise we have no point of reference, right? We have no point of reference from what good or bad is, or, I don't know. I mean, we'll never know, the answer to that probably in this lifetime, but it just opened my mind to what am I missing here? And the more you start to say, I don't know everything. I'm wrong about everything I ever pretty much thought. Nothing works the way that I thought it did. The information came in. It was like having humbleness and gratitude and just saying, okay, ask and you shall receive. I need to know, right? I'm just, okay, right. I need to know. So then it really changes things. And some people may look at that in a bad way. My dad did. He was like, oh, you're falling away from the church. And what are you doing? And, and that's where it's very isolating, because you start to see these different layers and you're like, just like you, Mike, what am I wow, this whole astrotheology layer is here. Like, what are we reading? What are we talking about here? So I think just for me, understanding that I do have that omnipresence in me, which we all do, and starting to say, okay, now from that aspect, again, moving backwards, right, into that, now I understand that verse, what is it? Don't ye know ye are gods? That always really confused me in my church world. And now I understand that we are, co-creating, right? Our thoughts create the energy that creates a toroidal field. That's going to create electromagnetic energy that creates the electricity. That's the thought. Now we've put the energy into motion. All of this is, to me, energy, and it's all the spiritual side. And I really feel like if you don't look at it that way. And I'm going to be a little bit biased here because of my experience. So forgive me. But I really feel like if you don't have that piece to it, you may be coming at it from a different perspective. Like, well, I just want to figure out how to get all my bills paid off. I mean, who doesn't? Let's be honest. Okay, we all do. But coming at it in like an inquisitive, you know, person who just wants to understand that whole side of it as well really changes your perspective to where you're not even so much worried about that. You're just curious of how does this like free my spirit, essentially, right? That's kind of how I'm an Aquarian, so we like to be free like birds. Like if anything confines us or holds us in, we're like, I got to back out of this. So this whole matrix that we're in was very much like that for me. And I think a lot of people, right, we go, do I even belong here? You know, you've had that kind of question. What's my purpose here? I don't, you know, I still am finding daily, I think my purpose here every day is to, you know, help or assist others in some way. I just, you know, humanitarian in me. But coming at this whole legal side, and that's why I love Bryan Parker's group, and, you know, can't say enough great things about Bryan. He's really, you know, like I said, I called you the OG, Bryan. You're the OG of all this, right? Because he is, you know, him and the group that he was learning from educated people like me. And I'm so grateful for that, because now I'm like, I kind of see the end, and using, you know, some of Bryan's words and things that he's looked at, seeing his, you know, beautiful documents that he's written. The man's a genius. I mean, you really are, Bryan. And I'm not just, again, trying to
I don't
say
know
both
about
of you
that.
guys are. I mean, seriously, I'm very honored to be here because you both are. And I want to express that. Like, there's not a lot of people who see these layers. We just go about our lives saying, this is what we know and this is what it is. And it's really not. So opening your heart and saying, I don't know what I'm doing here. And that's where I was like, oh, thank you for Bryan Parker, because I was very lost at the beginning. I didn't know. And, you know, they were way over my head. I told him this. You know, it took me a long time. I mean, I'm going on this better part of probably close to a decade now. And everything is just repetition. You can't try and tackle everything at once. You have to do one thing at a time. And the first most important piece is recognizing that spiritual side, that it is mimicked. The legal system is mimicked off that, and you'll get a whole lot further. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Bryan?
Well, yeah, she talked about her cancer experience, and I think people need to realize that extraordinary knowledge is going to come from extraordinary experiences. You aren't just going to continue living your life the way you always do. I mean, there's some people that have to be, thrown on their butt and thrown into prison for 15, 20 years so that they don't have any other things, clouding their vision in order for them to study and research things. You have to have something that occurs to you, unfortunately. And I know when I died, I died and spent a month in a coma. I was never even supposed to make it out. I wasn't even really supposed to live, period. But that experience opened my eyes to things that are on the other side, and that we are a lot bigger than what we think we are. And the whole realm we are in is much different than what we think it is. You're talking about, spirituality and law. Because I never went to a public school, always went to a Christian school. And so, I was fed scripture minimum 6 days a week. Okay. But there was a lot of things that really didn't make sense to me. And then when I started getting out and researching the legal realms, all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of that verse, or this reminds me of that chapter. Or I remember the same exact situation occurring in this book in the Bible. And I tell people, whenever you want to try and figure out a problem, try and get as close to the beginning of it as you can, so you can wrap your head around what's really occurred. And so in studying the legal realm, I started studying USC, United States Code. That's where all law stems from the federal side. It stems from Congress. And I was going back and reading like our Title I, Title II, Title III, United States Code. And I remember reading that and I thought, gosh, this seems familiar. And I mentioned this last week, with Kary. And the second time I was like, gosh, I know this. How do I know this? And partway into the third time going through it, it dawned on me. I felt like an idiot. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first book of the Bible. This is the first chapter of Genesis. This is the establishment of man. This is the establishment of jurisdiction, jurisdiction over the land, jurisdiction over the air, jurisdiction over the water. And it became just so obvious. And then more and more things that I was researching and experimenting with were coming back to show that they were following scripture. They were mirroring scripture with just about every aspect. You look at like securities with T+3 and some of their codes. Um, you look at how you have your bank account set up and that the borrower is servant to the lender. Even if you're receiving a minute amount of interest, pennies a year, you're still receiving something from them. So you're receiving a benefit. And he that accepts the benefit also holds the liability as well. And you can go in and make changes to your relationship with the bank account and see that, yeah, they are absolutely following that idea of the servant. He owes the lender. He's in a diminished capacity. So you don't want to
Bryan,
pay
can I
him.
just jump in for one quick sec? I don't want to interrupt you. I want you to
No,
finish
go
for
for
sure.
it.
Have you ever taken a look at the Code of Hammurabi? I mean, I have through an astrotheological perspective, but
Yeah.
can you trace that Genesis too? Because that predates Genesis. Can you see how like
Right.
trade and commerce and like responsibilities kind of build from that?
Yeah, I recommend people read Code of Hammurabi. I recommend people read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That's a very interesting book to read as well. All these things that you were taught in life by the church not to read, guess what you should be reading?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, a very isolating move, but well worth it in the end.
Right. Oh, let me give you a really good example on that as well. Take Paul. When I think he was put in front of the court like 3 different times, but one time he was in front of the court, he is retelling the story that he had told 3 different ways before about his experience on the road to Damascus, and that Jesus appeared to him and said, why do you persecute me? Is it not hard to kick against the pricks? And most people, when they read that, when he was reciting that in front of the court said to him, the defense, or not defense, but the prosecutor says to him, he says, what, are you mad? And that statement in the scripture just doesn't really make sense. But if people explore extra biblical information, they'll find out why the prosecutor was saying that to him. The prosecutor is going, dude, are you a crazy man? And the reason why is because Paul was quoting a verse from a play that had been written a few hundred years earlier that all of the Greeks there would have absolutely known. That was actually a common saying for them. It came from a play that had been done in Greece almost 400 years earlier. And so, if you know some of these other things, it starts making all the pieces of the puzzle kind of fall into place. And that's why I say scripture it's an awesome book for just all the hidden gems that are in it. It's like a treasure hunt. You know what I mean? And
So,
you're supposed to be examining it. That's what you're commanded.
so I don't know if either of you two know this about me, but I mean, I teach astrotheology for Santos. I've talked to all the great astrotheologists. I've sent them my work. I was close with Jordan Maxwell prior to his death. But I started off 10 years ago. I watched a Santos Bonacci video. I watched 5 more of them. And then I went into a mental hospital for 3 weeks. I don't know if I ever told you guys or if you know this about me, but I had a complete mental breakdown from this. And while I
Sorry, I
was
didn't mean
in
to
my
laugh, but
no, it's okay.
But we understand.
While I
yeah,
was
Get
listen, you
why.
guys are sharing your stories. That was my break, and I was there for 3 weeks. Now, while I was there, they couldn't give you any pens. You can have shoelaces or pens because you could So I had like it wasn't a highlighter. It was like a really thin crayon, right? Or I had a set of crayons. And you know those blue books they used to give you in college to write your essays on? Right? I was
Yep.
in there for 3 weeks and I wrote my first book in the mental hospital with a crayon
Wow.
on like 30 different stacks, which turned into my 9-book series. Jordan Peterson, for what you like him or dislike him, he says that the pathway through enlightenment to enlightenment it needs to go through a pathway through hell. That's why there's not so many enlightened people. You do not come out on the other side able to help people or to explain people what you've been through or just how you see things unless you've had a life altering experience like that.
You have to go through the fire.
You need to have your entire reality shattered. And it just makes you angry to realize that if we were teaching children all the kind of stuff that we talk about, what the world would actually be like. Okay, because the reason it's so mind-blowing is because you've been lied to your whole life. Okay, the problem with church, the problem with synagogue, the problem with the mosques is twofold. Number one, they're teaching the literal version of the holy texts. Okay, which if you read it literally, you're going to have a problem because that's never how it was supposed to be read. And number two is it makes you believe that there's an infinite being, okay, that you are somehow separate from, that will judge you at the end. And it scares the shit out of you. Okay, they'll tell you, this is the religious talking, that he's infinite. All right, I'll play that game. Well, if he's infinite, how am I separate from him? And when you come to that realization and you realize that everything is God, okay, because when you're talking about it on a micro level, okay, you're talking about this highlighter. Well, this is number one, this is part of infinity. And number two, at the Planck level, okay, string theory says that these strings are vibrating this thing, which is giving it its color. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. So when you talk about that, nothing exists outside the infinite. Everything is God. And when you realize that everything is God, the good, the bad. When you come to that understanding, then you no longer ask where God came from because God is everything. Where God is or where God came from, that's a question within creation. And God is not within creation. God is creation and outside of creation and everything. And that's what I try and share people. That's the kind of realization that I came to. And you'll lose friends and family over it.
The Book of
Yeah.
Thomas says that though too, doesn't it?
Yeah, Gospel 77, split a piece of wood. Thomas, verse 77, split a piece of wood, and I'm there. Lift up a stone, and you'll find me. Well, like, God is everything. That makes sense now.
Yeah. You
You
feel
know?
the wind against your face. That's the spirit. That's His spirit you're feeling. And
Yep.
I'll tell you what, standing out here in this hurricane we just had, and ones we've had in the past, you really feel the power, the energy, and the authority.
Yeah, you do. You do. But you're not separate from it. You're no more separate from God than your child. We experience it with children, exactly how it is with God. We are a part of God experiencing itself subjectively. Just like your children are half of your DNA, so they're a part of you, but you experience them subjectively. And on and on and on and on. It's the same thing. But guys, I really, really enjoyed this. Maybe we'll do a spiritual one next time since we all came out and told everyone our problems at the end. I had a
It's fair.
really, really good time. DM me your email address if you want the raw file. Okay, Bryan, if you want to put it up. Kary, I don't know if you have a group or if you want to share it, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm going to put this up right now. So I have to download it and then upload it. So we went an hour and a half, guys. So much love. I will talk to you guys soon. Keep on rocking. Keep on doing what you are doing, beautiful people.
Much love to you guys too. And thank you for having us, Micah. It was very sweet of you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this at all times.
Absolutely. Learn who you really are, where you're really at, and where you're really from. That's what it's all
Yeah,
based on.
absolutely. Absolutely.